Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. I've got my friend and once student, Shane, with us. Shane is coming to us from Texas today, and we decided we were going to do a podcast with Shane because he was involved in a shooting protecting his homestead. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. Yeah.
I like the shirt choice for today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thought I'd represent.
I like it. So you were in a class with us in Austin, Austin area. Smithville, that actually is, isn't it? Smithville.
I think so, yeah.
This past, was that October? September, something like that?
It was October. I think it was the beginning of October.
Gorgeous weather, and we had some fun training. And then you shared with us at class an incident that happened with you a couple years back in January 2017, if memory serves.
Yep, that's correct.
I just asked you 30 seconds ago. So I thought it was a good story. You volunteered to talk about it, and I think there's a million lessons that our listeners can learn from what you did, what you didn't do, and then how you broke it down after the fact, things that you said, I probably wouldn't have done this or should have done that.
Yeah.
Back to the matter is you're alive, and it all worked out, but why don't you break it down for us? Okay.
I guess the best thing to do is just start from the beginning. It was, like everyone always says, it's a normal night. We, the only thing we did differently was my wife turned on the light that shines on our driveway. And we went to bed, and at about 12:50, I heard my dog barking, just going nuts.
Let's go back one step.
Yep.
You live in a neighborhood. You're not out in the middle of nowhere, like on a 5,000 acre ranch. You're in a neighborhood where there's other people, other houses, right?
Right. I did. We've moved since then, but yeah. And so about 12:50, my dog just starts going nuts, barking. And so I grab my gun off the nightstand and get up, and I go check everything out. And I hear some pounding out in the driveway. And I look through the front door, and I can't really see anything. I see a little bit of movement. So I open the door and go out to check out what it is. And the way our driveway was set up is the my vehicles were kind of offset to one side, and the door was like right here. So I was looking across my truck to where it was. So I had to walk kind of to
looking to where the noise was coming from.
Exactly. And I kind of walk around the side of the truck, and I was backed in, so the front of the truck was at the other end. And I see someone standing there, and it looked like he had just got done punching it for whatever reason. So I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he kind of stops and looks at me, and he's just huffing and puffing. And I'm like, okay, what's up with this dude? And I say, "What are you doing? You need to leave." And he starts saying something like, "She's a liar. She's a liar," and stuff like that. I said, "Dude, what do you think you are?" And he told me the street name, which was a couple of blocks over. And I was like, "That's not where you're at, dude. You're at the wrong house. You need to leave." And he's like, no, I'm not. She's a liar. And he just kept going on. And then he started to approach me. And this whole time I had my gun just kind of at the low ready, pointed at the ground, trying not to be too threatening with it, but obviously he knew I had it. And as soon as he started walking towards me, I raised it up at him. I tell him, "Stop, don't come any closer." And he stopped for a second, and he, continues on saying she's a liar. And then he starts coming closer. And I said, "If you come any closer, I'm going to shoot you." And he still keeps coming. And as he's coming closer, I'm backing up towards my house. And he ends up saying that he's invincible. And that's whenever I knew this guy was not in the right mindset. He ended up backing me up completely to my door of the house to where I couldn't go anywhere else. And then he swiped for my gun. And as he did that, I pulled it back and immediately pushed it back out and fired a shot. Because at that point, I thought, he wants my gun. That's lethal force. He wanted to take my gun away from me, and I didn't know what he was going to do with it at that point. And the surprising thing is whenever I fired that shot, nothing happened. It hit him.
And this was a 357 SIG, if memory serves, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yep.
I remembered that.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing happened. The only thing I saw was basically his sweater move from the blast.
And this was a duty round. It wasn't.
It was.
Which I don't even know if anybody makes training ammo for that stuff, but
I don't know. I haven't checked. It was Ranger ammo. You know, like they give police officers and everything. So it wasn't anything to mess around with. You know.
Sure.
And like I said, he didn't even make a face. He didn't grab his chest. Nothing. It was like I just took a puff of air and hit him in the chest with it. And then he started coming at me again. So at that point, I fired at that time what I thought was 3 shots until he dropped. And then I stood there waiting. I watched him, making sure he wasn't going to get back up. He moved around a little bit, and then he eventually stopped. And right after that, I went inside, closed the door, told my wife to call the police, and she was just in shock. She didn't know what was going on. So
she woke up to hearing gunshots outside the front door.
Yeah, basically. I mean, she's used to me getting up at night, you know, hear something, I'll go check it out. No big deal, you know, like you normally do. You just hear something, you get go look around. But this was obviously very different. Mm-hmm. So she was just in shock. She didn't move or anything. So I quickly threw on some shorts because the whole time I was in my underwear. I didn't even have time to put anything on before everything happened. And I grabbed my phone and called the police, and I went back outside and was talking to him while I was making sure this guy wasn't moving. I got off the phone, and whenever I got off the phone, I looked at the time, and it was 12:55. So the whole interaction took less than 5 minutes from start to finish. Right after I got off the phone, my neighbor came outside asking if there were gunshots, and I told him yes, and I said I was calling the cops and everything. He had his gun out and everything also. As soon as I got off the phone,
God bless Texas.
Well, this was in Louisiana at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, and then as soon as I got off the phone, I was like, I need to put this gun up because I still had it in my hand. So I put it on the back of my sofa that was right there by the front door, and then went back outside and kind of waited kind of in the open for the police to show up. And as soon as they showed up, I put my hands up. He got out of the car. He had his gun drawn, ready for anything, you know, like you should do. And I told him, I'm unarmed. I'm unarmed. And I said, the other guy's right here. So he came up, and I kept my hands out in the open the whole time, and he came and looked, and he said, okay, put your hands behind your back. You're being detained. So I completely complied the whole time.
Sure.
Stood there for a little bit while he waited for backup to get there. Another police officer got there, and then they put me in the cop car. And then a little while later, they ended up taking me to the police department. Then I waited in I guess kind of like a holding area where they first take you in. They handcuff me to a table for a little while, and then
pause at that point. Let's go back for a second. So you wake up, you hear the noise, you go outside, you confront this guy. How much time elapsed do you think from the time you stuck your head out till you shot that first shot? So did you guys have like a lengthy conversation?
No, it didn't take long at all. Like I said,
less than a minute.
Yeah, it was a couple minutes. So, like I said, I looked at my phone right before I went out, and it was 12:50. Whenever I got off the phone, it was 12:55. Whenever I got off the phone with the police, so it couldn't have taken more than 3 minutes between me going outside and shots fired. So it was very quick. There was no way of knowing. You know, people say that you can always kind of get out of things, but things happen so quick that it's hard to think of every scenario at the time, you know.
And just so people understand, you're not just some hillbilly with a gun.
No,
You've got some training background, right? You're a veteran.
Yep, I was in the Navy. I did 2 deployments to Afghanistan. I was a CB, you know, the construction force of the Navy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm used to using guns, and I'd like to think that I'm fairly proficient, you know.
Sure. What I was trying to make sure that the viewers and listeners understood is that you have more training than most, and we're not just some dude out there looking for trouble in your driveway at night. I just want to make sure that
right.
is clear. When you told me the story, I said to you, well, why didn't you just stay in the house and call the cops?
Yeah, that's because it's my house, you know, and, you know, most of the time my thinking was if I go outside and there is somebody there and they see me with a gun, any normal person is just going to run away. You know, if they were trying to break into my vehicle or something, they're just going to flee and run. And that obviously didn't happen, you know, and it's, like I said, it's my house. I have the right to check out anything that's going on my property.
Of course,
you know, tell people to leave, whether or not they think they have the right to be there, you know.
Something else you mentioned when we first chatted about this is you went through your mind, my wife's just a few feet from this door inside in bed, and this scuffle ended up where this guy pushed you through the front door. Now you've got a lunatic in the house.
Absolutely. You know, and whenever he started saying that she's a liar and that he thought he was at that other person's house, I immediately thought my wife's in there. He's not in the right mindset. He doesn't know what's going on. He might go in and see her, and who knows what's going to happen at that point, you know?
Okay. Well, let's jump back to, so they've got you at the police station, interrogating you.
Yeah. They, like I said, this whole time I was just in shorts, basically. Didn't have time to put anything else on before they even showed up. But yeah, I ended up sitting they moved me from the intake room into an interrogation room, and I sat there for, I don't know how long. It was quite a while, but they eventually came in. The detective ended up taking my statement. This whole time I didn't get a lawyer. I didn't feel like at the time I really needed one. I just told him exactly what happened, you know, which in my opinion still is probably the best case scenario, is just tell them exactly what happened. And so they took my statement, and I ended up waiting some more. They came in, they had one of the investigators come in that took my fingerprints, they took my photo, they took gunshot residue off of my hands. They took my clothes as evidence, and they ended up giving me more clothes that my wife brought me at that point. Okay. And then waited a while, and then they eventually released me to my wife, and we ended up having some friends from church come who took us to their house after that. And
you were never charged with anything, correct? Never
charged with anything. A few months back, well, I'll say a few months, it's probably been at least 6 months now, they ended up saying that everything was being dropped, the case is closed, nothing's going to happen with it, just based off of the evidence. And afterwards, I ended up learning more about the whole story. This guy was a repeated offender, which doesn't affect me in my case. Anything I learned after the case, you know, just from the law standpoint, anything I learned after does not affect what did happen at the time. You know,
sure, right. We're judged by what we knew at the time of the incident.
Exactly. And like one thing you mentioned in class, you know, you can't say, oh, well, I learned this guy was a wrestler, and say, well, I did that because he was a wrestler, you know,
right.
after the fact.
After you see it on Facebook 6 months later.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. So I'd never seen this guy in my life before that moment. So my first contact was seeing him hitting my truck. So, but anyways, after I learned that before I saw him, he had taken triple C's, which is like a cough medicine that people take to get high and hallucinate.
Okay.
Even the coroner ended up confirming this and saying that it's basically like the lights are on, but nobody's home.
Okay.
So that explains why he was acting the way he was and why he thought he was invincible. And after he had taken those, he had attacked his girlfriend and his girlfriend's mother, and they ended up chasing him off the property. And that was whenever he ended up in my house.
So he was elsewhere in the neighborhood, beat up two women, left there, came to your house, and then I think you and I had, when we had last talked on this, you had found out he had multiple felonies for things like robbery, assault, and things like that from the past, right?
Yeah, I think robbery, assaulting a police officer, running from the police, and I think, from my understanding, he was shot once before, which could have attributed to his thinking he was invincible, but
sure,
who knows? But yeah, after everything happened, though, I called my parents. My wife called her parents, and I got a call from my dad a few hours later. He was already halfway there, and he lives 12 hours away from where it happened. So he, without even thinking, just hopped on the road and started coming. My wife's parents came immediately also, and they were there the very next night.
Very cool.
Yeah. I forgot to mention also that whenever I finally got released from the police, it was probably 7:00 in the morning.
All right.
Yeah,
I think your scenario is probably a best case scenario.
I think so too. I was very blessed in many ways in the way everything ended up coming out. Even when the police came out with their statement, they said my back was literally against the door. All the evidence lined up exactly with what happened. So I think everything just fell perfectly into place for me.
I have a friend that was a sheriff in South Alabama, and he had, during his 20 years as sheriff there, several incidents like this. And he's the kind of guy that would show up even if he had guys on duty and make sure that the citizens were taken care of, because there are lots of locales where they don't have these incidents happen very often. And the cops are like, geez, we don't know. We don't do this very often. We're just going to bring them in and let a judge and jury figure it out, because we don't know, what to do. So I think that is one of the things that stands out to me from a education standpoint. Us folks that have this notion of protecting ourselves, I think you said it, somebody that was just some kid trying to steal change out of the car or get hubcaps. They don't have hubcaps anymore, but whatever. Somebody like that's going to take off running. And this is the silly notion of, I'm just going to shuck my shotgun and the bad guy's going to run, or I'm going to.
Exactly.
Criminals like this guy has been to jail, has been arrested, has been shot. He's high and on drugs. They're not thinking like a normal, rational person. Thus, our decision-making and our actions can't be based on what a reasonable, normal, sane person would do.
Yeah, and you have to take in everything that's happening at the time. You can't go off of past experiences or stuff you read online. You have to go off of what's happening in front of you. And sometimes you might make the right decision. Sometimes you might make the wrong decision, and then you just have to live with that.
Was there any pushback from his family?
Not directly, no. They did make comments on the news. The girlfriend, which is crazy to me, she ended up saying, the normal thing you hear: why didn't you shoot him in the knee? Why didn't you, come to find out, I ended up shooting 7 shots total, which is one thing I'll get into a little bit later about everything. But she said 7 shots is too many, which is, to me, was the right amount because it stopped him. She was just completely distraught, even though she was beat by the guy, and from my understanding, ended up having to go to the hospital because of it. So that was pretty much it. They didn't come to my house or confront me in any way, or anything like that. So no real actual confrontations between them. They commented on news articles and stuff like that, saying that all that same stuff that I should have shot him in the leg or something. But
Sure, nonsense. How about your crazy, high, psycho, abusive ex-felon boyfriend shouldn't have been in my driveway at almost 1 a.m. looking for a fight? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. How about that? That makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost been 2 years. Where's your gun?
It's still with the police department or sheriff's office. I talked to the detective just last week, and he said that they just got it back from evidence. They sent it off to do ballistics testing on it. I guess it's, like they normally do. They sent it off pretty much immediately. And even after the case was closed, they still had it. And they got it back just last week. So almost 2 years later, they got it back. Now I need to get a letter from the district attorney saying that they do not need it for evidence or anything like that, and that the case is closed. And then I can go pick it up from them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Give me my stuff. You and I talked about this on the phone. You mentioned something along the lines of that gun was a gift from your father. So
it was. Yeah,
really,
it was. It was a SIG P229 Equinox, so it's not cheap. I think it was roughly $1,200 whenever he bought it in 2010.
Okay.
So after that, it kind of changed my mentality on what I will use to defend myself. I'm not going to use a family heirloom to defend myself. I'm going to use something that works every time, whether that be a Glock or the P320 that I have now or something like that. It's not going to be the race gun that's $3,000. It's going to be the polymer gun that I know is going to work every time I pull the trigger.
That makes some good sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, because, for a while I never knew if I was even going to get it back. My dad was a police officer, and he said that they would destroy firearms all the time for their evidence because, whether the case was closed and dismissed or whatever, and nobody ever ended up getting it back, whether or not they knew they could or whether or not they would give it back to them for some reason. So I had no idea up until about a week ago if I was going to get it back.
Okay. You said a moment ago you were going to get into some stuff that went on inside of you, the fact that you fired 7 rounds but thought that you fired 3 or 4.
Whenever I was in the military, they talked about tachypsyche, and it's something we talked about in class. And in the heat of the moment, you think you're doing things that you didn't do, or you do things that you didn't think you do. And one of the examples that I've seen many times is you think you fired 3 shots, like I said, and instead you fired 7 rounds, or you dumped the whole magazine. Or other instances have been, you think you fired the whole magazine and you didn't fire anything at all, and so for me, I just told them exactly what I knew happened to me, in my opinion. I told them I thought I fired 3 or 4 shots. And then evidence came back and saying I fired 7 shots. To me, that's not a huge discrepancy, in my opinion, and that doesn't change what I did or how legitimate my reasoning was for firing those shots. You just tell them what you know at the time. Hindsight is always 20/20, but that doesn't change, like we said, what's happening in the moment.
Sure. Has this changed anything for you and your wife? Has it changed anybody in the house lost sleep? Do you guys get out of bed in the middle of the night whenever you hear a cricket chirp? And
I still get up whenever I hear stuff. Like last night I heard something that sounded like pounding. It ended up being my dog shaking in his kennel or something like that. But that's something I've always done, get up and check out noises. And it didn't affect us too much. But what I can say is after something like that happens, you have to talk about it. Whether that be to people that were involved with it, your wife, your kids, or something like that, especially if it's your kids, you have to talk to them. You have to let them express how they were feeling and everything about like that. Because if you don't, that's whenever it compounds and ends up becoming PTSD from it. I'd been to counseling for PTSD previously, and that's one thing we did too. They basically had me sit there, close my eyes, and talk about everything that would cause me stress or something like that. The scenarios that ended up compounding to cause that PTSD and stress in certain scenarios. So talk about it as much as you can. Tell your family. Don't just go out to the news and tell everybody, though. You don't want to do that. That's unwanted attention. But tell people that actually care about you, not the person you knew from high school that's just trying to get the juicy details, because there's going to be a lot of them. Sure. You need to get everything out, and you need to talk about it many times. And that's how it becomes more normal after that.
In hindsight, would you have changed anything about how you communicated with the police? Do you feel that you took a gamble?
I think I did take a gamble a little bit. I would get a lawyer. But I think in a way complying as much as I did and being as open as I was, not hiding anything from them helped me also. So you need to kind of figure out your situation. Sure. I do say lawyer up, but don't completely clam up. Don't say, I need a lawyer, I'm not saying anything. Because I've always thought that makes you seem somewhat guilty, whether or not you are. Like I've said, this is my first time ever having sort of involvement with the police like this. So I don't know what happens after you get the lawyer, whether or not you end up telling your story anyways, or what happens, But I think clamming up and just saying, I'm not saying anything until I get a lawyer, can kind of hurt you in a way, because they'll start thinking more suspicious, and that's when you probably will be arrested and potentially charges placed against you if you do that. But like I said, every scenario is different, so go with it as best you can. There's no catch-all answer.
Yeah, for sure. The house that you moved to now, have you done anything like cameras outside?
No cameras. We do have security lights everywhere. Pretty much all the corners of the house have lights that are motion sensors and everything, so they pop on as soon as someone comes around. Okay. I need to get cameras. That's been on the list, but I haven't done that.
I'm a big fan of them. I can sit in any room and look at every wall around the house. I can, yeah. And I'm not paranoid about it, but like you said, if I'm in bed and if I hear something, I can pick up my phone, hit the app, and immediately see driveway, front door, back door, each corner of the house pretty much. And if a floodlight comes on, like if there's an area that's illuminated, like it might be a raccoon out there or something walking around. But.
Yeah, we have deer come out here all the time because we're out in the country now. So we felt like we needed to get away from people a little bit. Sure. We've had deer come practically right up to our back door. So
sure. Yeah, it's nice to be able to see. Like I'm using your story as an example. If I don't have to go walk out into the dark, and see, I'm gonna do that. Because who knows? What if you walked out there and there were 6 dudes sitting there ready to? I mean, that's an exaggeration. Of course, you have no idea. Right. Pack of crazies that are coming to steal your car or something, and they decide, shit, now we got a witness. You got no idea.
Right. And even then, if you do see someone, you can avoid the whole confrontation together and call the police from the inside of your house. Be ready for if they try to come in, but you can call the police from inside. You never even have to talk to the guy.
So let's talk about that. So there's this dynamic of it's my property. There was a shooting in Texas in July. Woman, I think she was pumping gas in an SUV. Her 2 kids are in the back seat. Dude comes up, jumps in to steal the car. She's screaming, pulls a gun. She gets in the passenger seat, and he's driving away with her kids in the back. She's begging to stop. She shoots him in the head, kills him. Car careens off the road, drives into a ditch. So you hear these stories like this, and of course, people commented, well, you shouldn't have had your keys in the car, or like all of these things like,
Yeah,
stranger shouldn't have walked up, stole a car with her 2 kids in the back either.
exactly.
So your point of it's my house, like I get it, my house too. I'll do a walk around. Who knows? Maybe a freaking tree branch fell on the roof. I want to make sure there's not a hole in the roof. Whatever the reason, you don't need to be justified to check out your property. But
Right.
I also don't want to put myself into a situation that's needless harm as
Right.
well. So
Right.
if I can make a call to the cops, they roll up with just the squad car alone might stop some nefarious activity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I said, every person's situation is different. Like that lady. I mean, she could not have known someone was going to hop in that truck or in her car and take off their kids. Like I need to get cameras just to have that extra layer of security. Even if someone ends up leaving, you still have video evidence of that guy leaving, or you might even see his face. And even if it does come to that confrontation, you have video evidence of everything you did.
Yeah.
So that can be an extra layer for you. Or if you do something stupid, attack them for no reason, that can hurt you, but most people that are, going to be watching this and are actually wanting to defend themselves aren't going to go seek out something like that,
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing. Like if we think about our motivation, your motivation wasn't to go out into the driveway in your underpants and shoot somebody. It was to see what the heck's going on. And I'm assuming people would hear this, or it could be spun. What, you shot a guy because he hit your truck? Big deal. That's what car insurance is for. No, I shot a guy because I begged him to leave and he tried to take my gun.
Exactly. It was everything that built upon that after I saw him. It's not I shot him because he was punching my truck. That's completely unjustified. But after I confronted him, he tried to take my gun. So at that point, like I said, that's lethal force, in my opinion. That was something I was taught in the military. Someone takes your gun, they're trying to close that force triangle where they have your gun and they can use it on you. And I wasn't going to let that happen. So I made sure he was not going to be able to use it on me.
Amen. Hey, you grew up with a father that was a lawman. Perhaps that has had something to do with your trust in being open with the police without legal representation. You think maybe that had something to do with it? Sure, dad had cop friends over as a kid and things like that, right?
Yeah, my dad was a police officer for over 15 years, so I completely trust the police officers. I mean, of course there are some bad eggs. Unfortunately, every job has that. Sure, but they're all out there for the best interest of the community. So. If I can make their job as easy as possible, I'm going to do it, because they have the same goal as me, is to go home safely every night.
Amen. Which is so. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was
just going to say, which is part of the reason that there's this fine line between protecting yourself, being willing to protect yourself, and then leaving it up to the authorities. Like we have this notion now in the U.S. where everything's just left up to government, and it's not the cops are empowered to protect you and us, but it doesn't mean that I can't protect myself or you can't protect yourself. And that is why we have these shootings, these public shootings where so many people get killed, because everybody just, that's a broad term. I shouldn't say everybody. Many people have programmed to just wait for help to arrive. And how long did it take you to fire 7 shots? A second and a half, second and a quarter.
Yeah.
And you're waiting 5 minutes for somebody to come help you. You're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the police probably got there another 5-10 minutes after everything happened. So even if I had called the police as I was going outside, and everything happened while they were on their way, he still wouldn't have showed up in time. I mean, if you can ask almost any police officer, and they'll say 99% of the time they'll show up after everything's done. There might be those little instances where they show up where it's still happening. But self-defense situations, it happens so quick that they're not going to be there by the time it's all done and set with.
And that's the decision we need to make ahead of time to protect ourselves. If XYZ happens, I'm willing to do what's required to go to bed tonight.
And that's something you do. Like I said, you need to make that decision. If you say, well, I don't want to shoot somebody, nobody wants to shoot anybody. Anyone in their right mind doesn't want to do that. But if you make the decision to say, if something happens, I will defend myself, then it kind of takes out that layer of mental block in that situation. Because if you've always told yourself, I can't shoot somebody, I can never do that, you wouldn't do it. So if you say, I will defend myself if it comes to it, I don't want to, but I will, then you will be able to. You're not going to have that extra layer of, oh no, I can't do this, I can't do this. And at that point, if you're telling yourself you can't do it, you won't. With me, that could have been that extra half second where he jumped on me and ended up taking my gun, taking it inside, shot my wife, or shot me and then shot my wife. Who knows what could have happened. You have to make that decision before anything happens.
Long before.
And that's why, get training. You don't have to, go to big expensive classes, but know how to use your firearm. Know simple things like pulling it back or pushing it forward, sidestepping. You don't have to be some gun ninja, but be proficient.
Amen. Yeah, I think that's this weekend here. We're tomorrow actually. We've got a concealed carry class that we're doing for permitting, and that's one of the things that we try to impress upon people is if you're putting it on you and you're not willing to do something with it, leave it at home. Get a whistle.
Yeah, it's
pepper spray because
it's basically dead weight.
Yeah, you're carrying it to make yourself feel better, but like in your story, like you said, if that guy got his hands on you, who knows? You're a big, strong guy. You probably would have stopped him. Who knows? But maybe not. Trip over the stoop.
Yeah, and like I said, he wasn't even fazed from being shot. The whole time I shot him, he didn't make a face. Not like he was in pain or anything. So if I had to get in a hand-to-hand combat with him, he might not have felt anything, and it wouldn't have even affected him. Who knows?
How close was he when you shot him?
He was probably about a foot or two away from my gun whenever I shot him. So it was point blank, and every shot was dead center in his chest. Nice little 3-inch group or something like that.
So not to be morbid, he was dead on arrival probably by the time the cops got there. He was.
Oh yeah. I unfortunately I stood there and watched him die. And that's another thing you have to think about too. Is if you are willing to defend yourself, you have to be willing to kill somebody. You're not wanting to kill somebody. That you're not trying to kill them when you shoot them. You're trying to stop them. And that's one thing, every time you talk to the police, even, if something happens, you have to tell them you shot till you stop the threat. But you have to know that if you pull that trigger, someone might die. Me heavily ever since. And it's just something you kind of have to live with. You have to know that this is something you have to deal with for the rest of your life after that.
It's a heavy duty decision, man. Yep. I think that's a good point, a good angle to end this on. Be willing to kill somebody, and it's not in a morbid way, but know that your decisions, that's the ultimate end of it. And are you willing to live with that? And is the choice that you're making, is it worth it? And when I say worth it, I mean, is it required? Is that if it's not, there's a lot of people, there's a couple high profile shootings that when you look at the totality of it, for example, the Zimmerman case in Florida. You know, they're like,
yeah,
yes, he ended up shooting the kid because he was getting his head smashed into the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
But did it have to get to that point?
Yeah, you know, if you can leave. Even the license to carry class here in Texas says if you can leave. You do have the right to stand your ground, depending on your laws. You know, you do have the right to stay where you're at if you're legally allowed to be there. But try to avoid it as much as possible. You know, in my situation, I was at my house. I had nowhere to go. I was backed up against my door. You know, so if you're out in an open area and someone tries to rob you, give them what they want, run away. You know, if they try to attack you further, then fight. You know, but like I said, every situation is different, so you have to kind of take it as it comes and examine that as it's happening, so that you can hopefully make the right decision.
Amen. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I hope to see you again, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be back down in Texas again in 2019, I'm sure. Keep in touch. If you guys that are listening or watching this have questions, you know how to get a hold of us at training@carrytrainer.com. We are happy to try to answer some questions. And of course, every one of these scenarios that you hear about, read about, are all unique. And you can't just take one and make all of your training decisions based upon the outcome of it, but there's something to be learned from all of them. So thank you so much for...
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Shane. Yeah, of course, man. Rest of you folks out there, if you haven't yet subscribed, please do. Share these videos on your social media feeds with others, because we put this stuff out there because it's good information to help other people be their own cavalry. Peace out.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.